It is critical that the United States recognize the need to reform our immigration system, because we are a nation of laws, but we're also a nation of immigrants. Like every nation, we have a responsibility to ensure that our laws are upheld. But we also know that as a nation of immigrants, the immigration system we have in the United States right now doesn't reflect our values. It separates families when we should be reuniting them. It's led millions of people to live in the shadows. It deprives us of the talents of so many young people, even though we know that immigrants have always been the engine of our economy.
That was U.S. President Barack Obama speaking to a crowd at a museum in Mexico City. The president is working with Congress on immigration reform, and he's confident it will be passed. We spoke to Republican strategist Lenny McAllister earlier. Lenny was in Chicago, Illinois, and he said when it comes to immigration reform, he would like to hear a more different tone from the president.
He's speaking to immigrants, he's speaking to a constituency, he's not really speaking to America. And unfortunately, this president has a very, very strong tendency to do this. And I think that this is probably going to be part of the problem when it comes to trying to actually get immigration reform. Once again, he's going to have to bring both sides to the table and smooth things over. And instead, I think he is doubling down on the fact that he's hoping that people such as Marco Rubio and John McCain can be enough to pull Republicans over to where he wants them to be when it comes to immigration reform, versus putting together a policy that's going to please more of the Republican base and more of the Democratic base, and just leave the fringes out of it. And unfortunately, this type of tone, even talking about how immigrants have always been the engine of the economy. When you're looking at African Americans here in Chicago, you're looking at a lot of Native Americans here, not Native Americans as in American Indians, but Native-born Americans that are struggling with the unemployment numbers that just came out Friday. Again, it pits one against another, and that's not how this is going to get done. So I'm hoping that when he returns home, we hear a slightly different tone from the president.
A lot of C words wrapped around this immigration reform bill. They're calling it common sense. But is this more about concession than compromise?
We don't know. I think that right now we're going to have to see more compromise. I think some of the concessions, I think he's hoping is going to come from the Republican side of the aisle. But with that type of trend in place, I question if we're going to get anything done by the end of this year. If you remember, they've already walked back the expectations from this summer to the end of this year. Well, if we get to the end of this year, you're going to see, once again, 435 people start campaigning for their jobs in 2014, and you're going to see about 35 senators doing the same. Once you get into that cycle, nothing's going to get done until after November 2014. And if Republicans are successful with the midterms in 2014 like they were in 2010, you may not see anything get done for a while. So again, I think that we have to caution the president. I think he needs to make sure that he's talking to both sides of the aisle, talking to a wider portion of America, not just the people he thinks he can count on. That has been a miscalculation he's seen with gun control recently. I think he'll see the same thing with immigration if he continues the same exact playbook.
Well, since you bring it up, let's talk about gun control and the fact that the NRA are holding their 142nd annual meeting in Houston, Texas right now. Take a listen to this clip from Wayne LaPierre, and then we'll get to the questions.
It's up to us, every single NRA member, every single gun owner, all Americans all over this country, to get to work right now and to meet them head on with an NRA that's strong enough and large enough to defeat any and all threats to our freedom. Today, we are a record 5 million strong. We must not and we will not slow down, not one single bit. By the time we're finished, the NRA must and will be 10 million strong. 10 million.
Obviously looking to double their ranks there. Lenny, if you listen to what Wayne LaPierre said there, he's talking about gun control, and that is removing the freedoms and rights of Americans. Will effective gun control actually do that?
I think that if we go after gun control the right way, the answer is no. We can respect the Second Amendment here in the United States and still be able to curb gun violence. But again, the NRA, the president, the Democrats are not talking about what gun violence is really about in America. Everybody's reacting to Sandy Hook. Everybody's reacting to Aurora. But the gun violence that we deal with on a regular basis happens on the south side and west side of Chicago. It happens in New York City. It happens in the Hill District in my native Pittsburgh. It happens in south central Los Angeles. And that gun violence is directly tied to bad economy, lack of jobs, lack of hope, bad schools, and children growing up in a culture of death. When you change that, the violence that we're afraid of in the United States will curb back. And then from there, you can put sensible gun control measures into place that will still respect the rights of law-abiding gun owners, while at the same time do what we're saying that we want to be done, which is basically not have the gun violence that we've been seeing across the United States for decades now. But until people start talking about the economic factor behind the gun violence in America that we see night after night after night, this is just rhetoric from both sides. The NRA is going to gin theirs up with the hardcore right, and then you're going to see the hardcore left trying to go for a gun control measure that's only going to infuriate law-abiding gun owners.
Well, Lenny, I think you hit on a very important topic that's been glossed over for obvious reasons. The highlight nature of the major crimes that have been committed based on multiple shootings in several places sort of overshadows the heart of what the problem is. You're talking about economic factors that are impacting much of your nation.
And as long as you start seeing an unemployment rate come down 7.6, now down to 7.5, but people continue to drop out of the workforce, when you're only adding about 120,000 jobs and you're calling that a success, you can't focus on the economic factors. If you do that, this administration has to basically say to themselves, we have failed. We basically have blamed a lot on President George W. Bush when we came into office, and we have not been able to turn the tide even when we had a supermajority and a huge majority in the House of Representatives. People are being caught up on the fringes, whether it's the Gosnell trial here with the abortions in Philadelphia, or it's been the gun control issues, or any of the other things that have come up, or immigration. The truth of the matter is the United States of America will be a more united nation if we can get more people back to work and get them back to work with fulfilling jobs, not just the $8, $9 an hour jobs.
That was Republican strategist Lenny McAllister, and he joined us from Chicago, Illinois.